All right, welcome everyone to Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Doyle from Roxana PD in Illinois. He has 25 years experience in law enforcement, and I am really excited to have him as a guest. So welcome, Chief Doyle. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to have a conversation, but I would love to get a little bit of background on you first. I know you just celebrated 25 years, you said.
Yes. Yep.
And prior to that, you were in the military. You were a jet engine mechanic. And so if you
Yes.
can give us a little bit of background on you, the last 25 years, what those looked like.
Back to the military, start with the military or in
Yeah,
here?
anything you'd like to
Um,
share.
well, I always wanted to be in law enforcement. When I got out of high school, I started my associate's degree in criminal justice. Uh, Decided that the schooling part was not as good for me. I joined the Air Force when I was 20 years old, going to 21. Uh, and I really wanted to be into law enforcement then. They said I scored too high on my ASVAB to do that. So they picked my job, which was jet engine mechanic. And I worked on F-15s, uh, training. Our base was a training base for pilots to learn how to fly the F-15s. So we flew a lot of sorties daily. And this is probably one of the greatest experiences of my life. Even to this day, I still look back on it and think it was a great experience. And then through my career here, I've worn many hats, been lucky for everything that my prior chiefs have given me here to do. Uh, and just, I've always been a trainer for it's one of my first jobs I ever got when I started here was a trainer. And I was the firearms trainer. When we finally went to rifles. I was the rifle instructor through the department and other departments. When the tasers came along, I was a taser trainer. Uh, Back to the OC spray. I was the trainer. I took on many roles here because of a smaller agency, and it definitely has made me wiser to use of force issues. That's kind of the route that I went until Uh, I learned that I like to talk to people as well and got into more of the investigation side of things. Uh, and I was just one of those people that once I knew this is the role I was taking, I focused on that role and just enjoyed the heck out of sitting there interviewing people, probably the way you do too. So,
Like now you're on the opposite end of it.
yeah, yep. It is different. And it's been a long, I mean, I interviewed for this position just like 3 months ago, which
Mhm.
was after 24 years plus, for this job. So, uh, being the chief's new to me, being a supervisor is not so new to me, but now I make all the decisions fall back on me.
Mhm.
That's every time I make a decision, that's what I have to think about. Like, how's this going to affect the whole department, not just me, So
Right.
I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying it, but yet it's some days is overwhelming, and I just hired my assistant today. He started today, I should say. I hired him a few weeks ago, and he worked here before. I was happy to have him back, and he's one of those energetic guys that likes the room because he smiles constantly.
Mm.
So we always called him Smiley, and all the people in town always knew him that way. And I was happy to get him back. I know it's going to take some time that I don't have to spend at work anymore because for the last 3 months, I put in about 35 hours of overtime every 2 weeks just to stay afloat. So I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to it. And, the guys are anxious. And I honestly, I really haven't thought about this podcast since you and I talked. So it's, the last time right before I went home yesterday, I was like, well, I'll watch the links that were sent to me and see what you're talking about before we got into it. And I'm like, oh, I can do this. So I'm
And
ready to go.
Well, I'm really happy you're here.
Yeah.
I know you said that you really enjoyed teaching other people and, training.
Mhm.
Do you think that that was a passion of yours to develop other people? Do you think that that like contributed to fulfillment on the job is teaching other people how to do these things? Because we know that like teaching is a whole different beast in itself. And, it's one thing to know how to do it yourself. It's another thing to be able to teach other people how to do it effectively. So do you think that that contributed to kind of your passion and your why within your career?
Yeah, during my time of training, and I still teach, uh, I always had a plan before I started. It wasn't just something thrown out there like, "Hey, this is what we're going to do today, guys." And
Mhm.
uh, and I would go off more recent events rather than, "Hey, this is the way we did it when I went to the police academy. This is the way we have to progress through what is happening to this day for law enforcement." And that's where I think a lot of agencies fail in their training, and because weapons have changed, tactics have changed. There's definitely more people out there that have been in war, actual served in wartime, and they learn tactics on how to deal with things. And I hope I never have to come up on another veteran that's suffering, but we have to definitely think about their known tactics.
Mhm.
And I've been in variety of situations, probably not as much as guys that work in towns of hundreds of thousands of people, obviously, but our incidents are definitely more isolated to our local area. So yeah, I love training. I really do. And it's like a day off for me when I get to go to the range, or it's a day off when I get to teach taser training. I just gave that up this year with the taser, but somebody else took those reins again. But yeah, I just loved it. It was the good times, that people learn from mistakes, and people also learn from the positives they learned out of the training too. And when you see them use them, and like when
Mhm.
because I have to review body camera, it's like, yep, I taught you that.
A
You know,
hundred
that's
percent.
that's the plus. Yep.
Yeah, and you can see that you have like so much pride. If anyone's watching the video, you can see you have so much pride in that. And I agree with you. I mean, I've been a teacher my whole life in one capacity or the other. We talked a little offline, but I trained skydivers and military skydivers, and I was a yoga teacher. And, there's lots of things I've done over my career to teach people. And I do think it's really rewarding to see people put those things into action. And then
Yeah.
for them to be able to then teach people in the future how to do things. And you're like developing them in, professionally. And I think that that is so cool to see, and I do think that it's selfless in a way because you're like, I just want to help you. But then getting that return is so fulfilling, to
Yeah.
have someone be like, thank you. And like, this changed my life. Or like, I didn't know it this way. Now I feel like I can do my job better or my life is better. So I agree with you. I think that it's really rewarding to be able to teach other people.
Oh yeah. And like uh in stressful situations where they're not having that time to think, and this comes down to training. Uh,
Yes.
it's more than rewarding. You know that maybe at some point you might have saved their life or somebody else's life. And now with, like I said, the body cameras, you get to see it after the effect of what's happened. But you definitely know that you've done what you're supposed to do when it goes right. You
Yeah,
know,
I can
I've been
imagine.
lucky in that sense so far.
And I had a mentor one time tell me, and this was in a different context, but I think it's relevant. They said that when you truly know something, you don't have to recall. You
Hmm.
just know it, right? Like you know
Right.
what to do. And I think that you're right in the context of like in a really stressful event, you should be able to fall back on your training and truly know how to do it or know what to do because of that training that in that work you put in place beforehand versus the recall. The recall means that maybe you don't really know it yet. And maybe there's still some more work to do to truly know what to do in that moment. So I do believe that that training is so important and you have that ability to rely back on that because sometimes, your brain kind of shuts off a little bit in
Right.
that moment, right? And so you have that training to fall back on.
Yes, and we always trained muscle memory. That's what it was
Mhm.
always called, was muscle memory, especially on the range or during defensive tactics and those type of things. But I think it's more than that, because if you actually are listening and you're understanding what you're being taught, it's more than that, because it definitely develops your mind for those situations.
Mhm.
Probably one of the I know I'm not going on course, but one of the things that I taught through my field training all these years of doing being the field training officer too was you need to practice these things in your mind, and when you're not busy, go through your what you would say on the radio, to go through scenarios of if you were having to pursue a car, or what you would do, all these things that when you keep doing that in your mind, you're keeping your mind working. Maybe sometimes I always thought, well, maybe I'm causing more stress than what I should to the guys. And in some respects, I thought that, and then I thought maybe I'm just making them realize that they need to pay attention to their surroundings and make them more aware. And that's the tough part of this job. I'm sorry, just once. That's the tough part of this job, uh, because it's hard to go home sometimes after you've had those stressful situations and go to sleep, because you got to be back in a few hours. And the adrenaline is you can get used to that adrenaline, which is awesome, but where it takes a toll on your body,
Mhm.
obviously. So uh, I know it has on me over the years. I worked so many years of midnights where the calls were a little more in progress, and some of the guys would be jealous of the fact that I worked all those years of midnights because they liked those kind of calls. And I didn't like to give them up, but I did. You progress in your job, and I feel like I'm more knowledgeable. I can give the guys more advice on things because I've lived them more
Yep.
than hey, I heard this officer had this experience and this is what I heard he did. I could say I've done these things too. So
Right.
when you're younger, you think, oh, they're just an old guy that doesn't they live in the past, but history does say a lot for you don't want to repeat bad things in history, obviously. So
Right.
uh,
And I love that you talked about visualization. And I don't know if you know that that's like the term that we use for it, at least in the wellness space that I'm in, is that visualization. And I used to teach this to EOD when I taught skydiving, and we would be in the plane on the rise to altitude, and we would say, okay, we're going to close our eyes and we're going to imagine the entire skydive from start to finish, right? We're going to imagine the light turning on. We're going to imagine the door opening. We're going to imagine the setup in the door. We're going to have the count of going out together. We're going to imagine every piece of it, everything that we had to accomplish within that skydive. And then beyond that, we're going to visualize the break off, the parachute deploying, our landing, and what that looks like in a very effective, efficient way. And we would do that over and over again on the rise of altitude until we got there. And then that would set us up for success because mentally we're there, we're in it, like we know what to do. And we teach this still now in the wellness space that I'm in is that visualization. How can you visualize, like you said, best case scenario? But how can you also visualize maybe worst case scenario and how you respond in that worst case scenario too?
yeah,
If mentally you're okay to do that, and that's like a whole nother topic. But I love that you said visualization. You're talking my language completely. I also love that you talked about um, having the ability to adapt. And you said it's not the like, this is the way we've always done it mentality. It's like, how can we take today and make it relevant for our people? And how can we adapt to that? How have you seen law enforcement change over the years, but how have you also seen wellness change over the years? And how have you had to adapt to that change?
in the beginning of my career, I was the single officer that I didn't have a family. I would get up before work. I'd go out to the gym and feel energetic for the night and ready just to go out and find criminals, put them in jail, and I I guess that positive energy, I come from a family of law enforcement officers. My dad's retired. My brother's currently a lieutenant in the adjoining town. My brother-in-law just retired 2 years ago. He was an assistant chief in another town next to us. And I, I, I remember my brother's chief because my brother went to the academy after me. He is older than me, but he went to the academy after me. And his chief at the time's like, I want you to come down and talk to me. I said, sure. And he goes, I want you to read this paper that your brother had to write while he's in the academy. And my brother and I lived together at the time.
Mhm.
And I had this ritual before I came to work. I love music. I you know uh, I'd have the music going. I'd be getting ready for work, and I had a set standard. I did this in progress. I never forgot. Like I never forgot my gun. I never for everything was in check before I walked out the door. And my brother's paper went into that, which I didn't know he wrote it, like that about me. And especially him being the older brother, that positive energy that I was giving because I loved my job so much that that's what made him want to be an officer. And I'm like, wow, that really that stuck to me. And there's times I've never actually talked to him about it. He's been an officer now for 20, coming up on his 24th year now,
Mhm.
and never really talked to him about it because we had an auxiliary program where he got to ride with me for a year and a half before he became an officer at the other town, and just the way that he spoke about me in front of all these other officers that were becoming officers as well at the time. I'm like, I can't believe I had that kind of impact upon him, and he's definitely going to be closer to retirement than I am because we're 18 months apart. So he gets to go a little further than me.
Lucky duck.
Yeah, lucky duck. But there's days that I don't even think about retiring. And there's other days like that can't get here fast enough. And I think everybody goes through that once they get to that age range. But uh, I'm probably not thinking about the whole question that you gave me. But uh, I think I'm way off track now, Paige. But if you can bring me back in.
No, that's okay. I was just curious of like how it's evolved over time, how the profession has evolved, how wellness in this profession has evolved over time.
So I think when officers get maybe a little more comfortable at this point, end up having a family, um, then your spouse is a little more about you need to be home more.
Mm,
I think that then the gym time starts cutting back, and then the kids start getting a little older where they're playing sports or different activities, and you're not putting as much thought into your work as you are your family. So it's hard to focus on your job when you get to your job sometimes, like maybe you need to be doing. But the difference in law enforcement has dramatically changed in my career. Uh, in the beginning, uh, when you dealt with people, I felt like there was more respect back then. Uh, People were more apologetic for maybe the problems that they caused, and they would apologize to the officer instead of maybe not apologizing to the people that they were having the problem with. But we still had that where you came on scene. I'm really sorry you had to come out,
mm,
and through time with I wouldn't even call it a liberal, more liberal mindset of people. in some areas. It's just people don't when you get on scene, they start screaming at you. Um, you know, they're going to sue you for words that you say or don't say. Sometimes you feel like that no matter what you do, you're just not going to win a situation as far as normal day-to-day calls. I know that, I mean, if you're getting down to tactics, if you're, uh, I know the guys who are better trained now than we were in the beginning of my career. Uh, And a lot of it comes down to state mandates, federal mandates. But I know that the officers are better trained because I felt like maybe when I started that some officers that were older than me were, that's just, well, I'll take this job and never really put their heart into the job.
Mhm.
And that was one of those, I always ask somebody in interviews, is this your passion? Is do you feel like this was a calling for you? Because those are rare breeds of officers that you don't find every day. Uh, when you find one, you definitely want to keep them. And in order to do that, sometimes as administrators, we give them too much and overwhelm them, and it burns them out. And the burnout is a huge problem for any law enforcement. Um, I've really, in my time as lieutenant and my prior chief, we even though we were the older guys, we always said we didn't want that to happen to the next guys.
Right.
And so maybe we picked up more overtime so they didn't have to, and we wanted them to have more time with their families. And then there's then sometimes people take advantage of that. Like, well, chief or lieutenant's gonna cover those shifts, so I don't have, and there's just a balance it's hard to get sometimes. Uh, I just think that there's no perfect way of doing things to keep the morale good all the time. And I guess you have to do self-evaluation. Like, okay, I've seen this. We got to do a reset, just like turn on your computer and turn it back on. Sometimes it's got to happen.
Yeah.
And those are productive talks that you can have with the guys to get that going again, unless they're in the funk. To
Right.
get the funk, it's tough.
Well, and it
Yeah.
sounds like to me that, maybe there's greater challenges within the community that's happening right now and
Mhm.
public perception of law enforcement. But as a result to that, there's now better training in place on how to handle those situations and how to de-escalate and things of that nature because you have to now, like you said, be able to adapt to the times and what is happening right now in the community and in the public perception is different than it was before. So how can you adapt your training and your wellness to be able to support people within the organization that are now going out there and maybe not having the best experiences, with people screaming, like you said, or the things that are happening. And so how can you then support their wellness through that too?
What we do, uh, the state of Illinois has mandates for dealing with people with mental health issues, which that's probably, I would say, 70% of our calls,
Hmm.
honestly, are mental health issues. The problem with what I see in my state is they made these laws for us. They have a 988 call for mental health issues. And actually, we're not even supposed to respond as law enforcement unless requested by mental health care professionals. And I don't know where that funding went, but that's never happened. And that came into effect almost 2 years ago. And we're still handling mental health calls. We're not having mental health professionals come out on these calls. Um, and we do have, and it's a 40-hour class that everybody goes through, especially our departments, for a CIT training, and that's for crisis intervention training. Um, so that you kind of know you learn de-escalation. You learn all the uh, places that you can get help for these people. They teach you, sometimes this is a better way of dealing with somebody in the mental health crisis than uh, others. I feel like sometimes when I've gone through those classes over the years, they kind of don't focus as much on our safety as much as they do the person having a crisis. And I mean, we can look at all these different stories that are out there right now as far as, officers being killed. And I think it kind of comes down to maybe some complacency, maybe some poor training,
Mhm.
maybe some poor mentoring. And I I notice maybe I use the word maybe a little bit because it's not always,
Right.
but maybe sometimes it's just the person that started them off in the career field through their field training at the time was not the right person to train them. Not everybody clicks, and people know, we all know, we've been around people that we've been in classes. It's like I really don't like this person's views on things. I've already just shut off,
Mhm.
and I can tell you through my different levels over 25 years, the generations have changed. The work ethic changes with different generations. Um, Everybody throws a millennial name out there, but sometimes that's tough because a lot of those uh, in that age group, their work ethic's not the same because the way that they're even taught in school is different. You know, they don't learn to do things on their own so much. They learn to do things in groups. And like at our department, on a typical shift, you might have just one person,
Mhm.
and you have to be able to do things, self-generate things, initiate those things. And sometimes you have to, like you said, adapt to what you have available to you. And a lot of times when you don't, when you've learned to use groups, you're thinking you're like looking at the other people in your group to give you answers sometimes. And you don't have that option. You have to do it on your own.
Mhm.
And it's a failure in our educational system a little bit, but I've seen it. I don't, I'm sure other training officers over the years have probably seen it too. It's just the change in how we have to do training to accommodate, I guess that's the word I'm going to use, accommodate people with generational gap and how they've learned to learn.
Mhm.
So it's not always easy. It's not always easy. And I'm rambling a little bit, but I had a younger officer. He felt I was condescending when I was uh, telling him how maybe this was not the best method of handling it. And the chief at the time he told me, he goes, he feels you're condescending. I guess that word that gets thrown around, a phrase, it's passive aggressive,
Mhm.
which pretty much anybody that knows me, I'm not passive. I'm very direct on how I tell people to do things. Because if you're beating around the bush, I always come back to him at the very end of it. And I'm like, do you understand what I said? And maybe that's maybe condescending, but I want them to know, and I want to know for my personal knowledge that you understood what I just told you to do and
Mhm.
how you need to do this. Um, that's a that's been a rough part for me in my last 5 years is the change in that generation because now those officers are in their late 20s and maybe early 30s.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And just learning how to communicate with,
it's,
younger versus older. And I think that that's a part of that adaptability too. It's like, how do we change our communication styles so that, because really at the end of the day, the most important thing is that, like you said, people understand what's going on. And if there's any sort of question, then like you said, that's a failure in the training. So how can you make sure? And that's hard because everybody, I think it's I'm sure that there's more similarities within generations, but I also think person to person, people understand things and communicate differently, and being able to adapt your teaching and your communication style for each individual, I think could be challenging for sure. I want to, I know that obviously this has a lot of different challenges, and within the different roles that you've had throughout the 25 years, I'm sure that there are different stressors that,
Yes.
you've had
Uh,
to deal with. How has the job impacted your personal wellness?
well, I think it depends. Obviously, the lack of sleep definitely affects you. Shift work definitely affects your wellness.
Mhm.
Uh, and then, just all the things that you've been exposed to in your life, mentally and or uh, physically, those things change you. And then when you have a health issue, that changes your mindset and it takes your focus away from what you need to do when you're out on out patrolling and like all those things. And it, it's just a matter of one of the things one of the things I had done when I found when I realized to my self-evaluation that I was not maybe able to sleep, because I had so many things in my mind. And uh obviously I would pray that I could just have some peace to go to sleep. Uh and obviously God answers those prayers. But I also would find a mental place where I knew I would that made me comfortable and happy. And I could, like you were saying earlier about visualizing, you
Mhm.
know, all the places I've been in my life. There's always those beautiful places that never leave your mind, and I focus on those. Uh, it, I just I find ways for myself to take my stress down.
Mhm.
And there's been times where I have been able to, and long stretches of stress that I don't think even doing exercise, eating different would have changed it. You have your uh, personal life, you have your work life, and you're trying to balance those. And I'm a father of six, so
Mhm.
there's a long road there of having children, and then you're having more infants where your sleep schedule's messed up, and your wife is expecting more of
Mhm.
you than you think you can give sometimes. And I probably did that to her as well. You know, we've gotten through it. I mean, our youngest is 13 now, so uh, it's it's a little less on me. And I think about those things for the officers that work under me now, and I don't want them to have to go through that if they don't have to. Uh, just I, you live by that adage, do unto others as you have them do unto you. Uh, those those are the things that I think about. If I stop where I'm thinking to myself, well, I had to go through that. Why shouldn't they? It's
Mhm.
not the attitude that you want to have as an administrator, supervisor. Um, some things are building that guys do need to go through to maybe build some mental toughness. I don't know if that's a good term or not, but you have to have some mental toughness and not always dwell on those things. So once again, I probably got off with the question you asked me, but
No, that was perfect. I know that offline we've talked a little bit about, you know, some of the health issues that you've had personally. We also talked about the fact that you have lost friends on the job. I want to know, how has that impacted the way that you lead and the support and the resources that you are now giving to your officers?
uh, wow. We in the last probably 10 years in our area. Uh, that's the St. Louis Metro. They call it St. Louis Metro East area. Uh, really have lost a lot of officers, and um, sometimes you feel like you don't really want to get to know people, so you don't feel as much loss. And that's sad, I think. It is sad. Uh, I I could say that nobody that I graduated the academy with, 27 years ago that I know of has been killed in line of duty. Um, we had an officer that was here at one point, went to a couple agencies from here, trying to better themselves, obviously. Like when I say better themselves, they wanted more fast-paced lifestyle, and he he pulled up to call it a new gas station just a mile and a half away from us, and suspicious call basically, and he was just gunned down. It was just I remember getting a phone call that morning from my brother, and he was working that day, and he just told me, he's been shot in the neck. I don't think there's, anything we can do. And you you have to you're you just don't know your mind just goes in 20 different directions. Do I go into work? What hospital is he going to? What are we going to do? And it it wears on you. It really does. And you've had guys that you've worked with that just died from aging, that had such an impact on your life. Um, Officer uh, Timmons, the one that was used to work for us that was killed, he had an impact on a lot of people. They do actually have a foundation. His wife was also a police officer. Uh, they have a foundation for him. We have a lot of foundations for fallen officers in our area, and they're incredible because it keeps the memory alive. Number one, um, we have we we have Mustache for March. It's a foundation. It was created by a lot of local mothers after Officer Blake Schneider was killed over in St. Louis County. And just like every year, they choose officers from local departments to send out to Police Week at Washington, D.C. We have an officer going out there just in a couple of weeks for that, and they do the airfare, they do the hotel accommodations, all those things. And I know sometimes just with death, you want to kind of keep it like you just want to forget. How can I forget? How can I just move on? Uh, but you never can, and because they're always going to come back in your mind. And here on my desk, I didn't know this, but a good friend of mine, he was actually one of my dad's best friends in law enforcement. He passed away a year and a half ago, just from age. He was a federal officer. His life, he was a firearms training guy for the Department of Defense, federal government. He rode with me for many years on my midnight shifts to keep me going. You know, uh, when the chief left, he he goes, I've never given you this because his daughter brought it in for him, and it's just it's a little piece of Dale that I keep on my desk, and it reminds me of all the things that he taught me. He was one of those guys that he spread his knowledge to me. He was a Vietnam veteran. Uh, he he retired from the military himself. Uh, like I said, he also was a federal officer. Just That was tough. That was a tough one for me because he's like a second dad to me. And he would ground me. That was one of the things that going through my health issues, you want to sit there and talk to somebody about your health issues. And he's like, why don't you worry about something else? You know, he goes, you're either going to live or you're not going to live. That's the kind of guy he was.
Mhm.
And sometimes you're like, boy, you don't really care so much. But I, I look back and I think he's just making me focus on what I'm doing right now
Mhm.
instead of dwelling. And I could have crawled into a shell and quit doing this, but I didn't want to. And I still don't want to, even with the health issues I have still. So it's those people that you meet throughout your life. They don't have to be law enforcement officers. I mean, we have a great community with our school. I've met some great people that wouldn't understand what you're talking about when it comes to law enforcement, but they're the ones that can give you better insight, like on things, the perspectives from the outside world compared to law enforcement world, because we all tend to stick to our group that we know that we're protected in. I
And
don't know if
I also think that it's like, to me, it's a testament of like we have the ability to impact people's lives in a positive way.
yeah.
And when your life is impacted by someone, not
Mhm.
only does that help you to get through the things that you're going through, but it also gives you the opportunity to take that and to try to be that for somebody else. And that's the snowball effect that happens. And I think that's the beauty of it, especially when you're in a leadership position. Now that you can say, hey, this is what I've been through in my life. Now you're humanizing yourself. So everyone in your agency knows, like, hey, I've experienced these things. I've had people that I've known who've died. I've had mentors who helped me through all of these things by grounding me, um, but then you're also like, you're able to give people permission. When you're saying, hey, like I've been through this, so you're being authentic, you're being vulnerable, you're sharing what your mentors helped you to do. So now they continue their legacy through you. And then you're giving people permission like, where you're like, hey, I know what it feels like. I know what it's like to lose someone. I know what it's like to go through health issues. I know what it's like to go through stressors at home. I got 6 kids. I know what it's like to try to keep a marriage together. And I think that that's a really good message to anyone who is either in leadership or anyone who aspires to be in leadership of like what you've been through is an opportunity for you to help others. And that's what I hear when you talk is like, you're continuing other people's legacies, but then you're also helping others through your experiences.
I try. I know that sometimes guys sit there and go, "Oh my God, I don't want to listen. I want to get out there and do things."
Yeah,
It's uh, and you can tell this because we've talked a couple times now that I talk too much. So, uh,
I do too.
so
Like that's probably why it's a good thing for me to have a podcast because I'm just like bop, 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 all day long.
you can always just edit me out of there, so you don't you don't have to have the whole story in there.
No, this is perfect. And I can't believe how fast time goes, but I do have just one final question for you, and it's kind of in the same um theme of, inspiring others and trying to help others throughout their career. What words of advice would you give to someone who is earlier in their career when it comes to wellness? Maybe something that you wish you would have known or something that's helped you along the way. What words of advice would you give to someone earlier in their career that might be able to help them out?
Well, that's a great question, and it obviously depends on their situation. So everybody has a different situation going on. I think one of the hardest things that I've seen and I've done was when I wasn't feeling well. I kind of was one of those people that refused to go see a doctor,
Mm,
you know, uh, and then you really never got well like you should have. And then even got more sick, those types of things. Um, Advice for somebody that's starting out that wants to finish their career in this. Um, like I tell the officers here, number one, you need to learn your job, and uh, your knowledge shows when you're talking to people, and people will not take you seriously when they know that you're wrong about laws. And we've been told for years now that, well, they don't teach us this in the academy anymore. They just say you'll learn when you get to your department. Well, I think it's important that the guys know their laws. I know that they know their boundaries. Uh, don't be hesitant when it comes to having to use force when necessary, because those things are the ones that will cause you stress, like we were talking earlier about having that mental mindset of, I can handle this situation. I've been trained in this situation, you know, and my mind's going to take over when that situation comes because I've practiced this in my mind. And you have you have to come into work. You have to prepare yourself mentally for what could come because we never know what's going to come.
Mhm.
And I look back on so many different events and incidents that I've been involved with that I never expected were going to happen on my shift.
Mhm.
And because you always heard, oh, I'm glad that didn't happen on my shift, but I, we, you just, you prepare for the worst, hope for the best. You have to train, you have to keep up your knowledge of current events that are going on. You can't just show up and do your 6 to 6, whatever shifts you're working, and go home because it doesn't. If you really care and you want to progress in the profession, you have to keep learning. And I learn something every day,
Mhm.
whether it's good or bad. And I'm learning more about politics that keeps my guys in play in our city to keep our community safer. Uh, I'm the guy that's finding the funds for them to have the best equipment. I never thought I'd be doing those type of things, but when you realize there's a app, it's on social media. Uh, it's a company that goes and trains law enforcement throughout the United States. And I get upset when I read some of it because, these younger officers, and I can tell they are constantly questioning everything that they've been told to do. And they're asking advice from the other officers throughout the United States, what would you do in this situation? But they're not given the facts. And it sounds like to me a lot of times whining.
Mhm.
Then you see some are like they read through the baloney that's getting put out there and they're like, why don't you learn your job instead of and you do the research and you find out what's the right thing to do, not I'm going to ask a million people on social media what their answer is because you're not going to get the same, you will not get the same answer through that whole thread, and it's so hard to bring somebody in the office after they've made a critical incident mistake and say you screwed up. That's not the way you were trained, and you worry about, you and I talked before about this, and I wanted to come back to it. We talked about retention, retaining officers.
Yep.
And I guarantee you, every supervisor out there is like, I don't want to say something to somebody because I'm afraid they're going to leave. I'm going to be
Mhm.
short-staffed. I guarantee it. That's one of the worst feelings you have. Or you're keeping a guy around that his heart's not in the job and is probably going to get themselves hurt or somebody else hurt. And it's it's not like it's just not the way it used to be. And I wish there was, I was said, I wish I had this crystal ball where I could have all the answers. Um, and I don't. And I only can do the best I can every day, depending on the situation. And like you were saying earlier about adapting, and no situation is the same. You
Mm.
cannot go back and say, well, I handled this kind of situation this way and it worked out well for me. It's not going to work. It may not work out well. And you got to sit there, you got to read the person you're dealing with. You have to read the situation and say, okay, these are all the tools that I've been given. How am I going to use these tools?
Yeah.
And that's what training, that's what preparing yourself for. Everything comes down to mental preparedness, no matter what you say. Because mental preparedness starts you into physical preparedness. Uh, you're going to be better when you're doing your reports, when you're mentally prepared to handle the call. You're going to be better prepared. You're going to have more. I always get on the guys about what's the final product that you're sending me.
Hmm.
Focus on that final product. And sometimes I get like, you say that all the time. Well, that's what's important because at the end of the day, if you're sending charges or whatever you're doing that goes to our state's attorney's office, it's got to be ready. It's got to have all those things that you need to have charges for someone or not have charges for someone. And I, my first chief, he'd always say, look it up for yourself and then come back and talk to me. Well, it doesn't work that way anymore because they're doing internet Googling of laws that may not even be in your state,
Mm.
don't even don't even affect you. And it's just knowledge. And I've always said knowledge is power. That's all these little sayings I've come up with over time that, the guys get tired of hearing. And I'm sure that someday, just like Dale that's sitting back here, I look back and I think, okay, what did Dale say? And maybe one of these days they'll be like, hey, what did Doyle say? Because that's what I go. Everybody calls me Doyle.
Mm.
And I hope that I can hope that what I've done someday saves somebody's life, whether it's one person.
Yeah.
And the beautiful thing about this many years in the job is when you have somebody come up to you and like, I appreciate what you did for me. I don't remember you. Well, I was 10 years old. I was five, and my parents were going through this, and you spent the time
Hmm.
to deal with the situation, not just if I got to come back, somebody's getting arrested, and those are big moments in my career. I've been with arresting people that have committed murders to whatever, and those are my special times. And I hope new guys have those special times. You know, uh, it's just this feeling comes about like, hey, I did the right thing at that time.
And I
And
appreciate that perspective too, because I think that a lot of times we say, like, how can we help and impact the lives within the organization, but to also say, how can I impact the lives within my community? Because, you know, we talked offline. I'm not sure how much I shared about my background, but my parents were drug addicts. My dad was in prison, and when he was released, he was in and out for another decade after. So I had a lot of police presence in my life. And I think that, to recognize that you have the power to impact not just your organization, but your community. And there are a lot of people out there who look to you for safety and, who are terrified because, like me, experiencing domestic violence and, needing law enforcement in that moment. And so I like that perspective a lot of, like, maybe I did help someone who was 5 who, witnessed domestic violence in their life. Or maybe I, helped bring comfort to someone who's going through a really hard time or a really bad day. Because we know that people in the community call you when they're having the worst day of their
Yep.
lives. And so if you can be that for someone, and then that helps to change public perception because then you're like, people will be like, well, that wasn't my experience. My experience was really positive. My experience was, you know, we had Smiley come up and help us and
Right.
and they brought joy to my life in that day, or they really helped me in this situation. So I love that perspective. And I live by this too. I love the idea of always be a learner and be teachable. And I think being teachable, because there's a difference between you saying, okay, I'm going to learn myself, right? I'm going to take it among myself to learn something. And there's another mindset of like, I'm going to be open-minded enough to take things that other people give me. Because that, I think, in itself is being teachable and adaptable and being able to learn and take different perspectives. And if you are closed-minded and someone's like, hey, why don't you try it this way? And you're like, well, no, because I've always done it this way. I think that limits growth. And so I love the idea of like always be adaptable, learn, be teachable, and maybe it's something that someone's telling you is not it. And that's okay too. But like having that open mind, and then how can you impact someone else's life, whether that's in your organization or your community in a positive way. So I appreciate you and your time so much and your insights, and I appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you so much.
I think when somebody takes pride, and I appreciate you too, they take pride in what they do the best job they can possibly do. And
100%.
that's a huge thing in this career field is taking pride in what you do.
Mhm.
And when you were talking, I was listening to you, but I was thinking, you know, that is, if you could put one word on how you can be a effective law enforcement officer, it's taking pride in everything that you do in your job.
Mhm.
Because you'll have all those great end products that come out of that. And I just, I'm passionate about what I do. I don't like to fail. That's one of the things I will not do. And if you got, like I said, the mindset, the mental mindset of I can get through this. I just need to be able to adapt to what's going on and do the right thing. And I wish sometimes that I wasn't getting as old as I am to do this job, because while we're sitting here, my guys are out serving warrants and I'm thinking, man, how much fun that was.
Good
You know,
old days.
yeah, the good old days. Yeah. It's just, I miss them. I miss those, but I also had looked forward to what I'm doing now,
Yeah.
you know, and I have to focus on what I'm doing now rather than get to do all the fun things.
Well, I think life, like we adapt and life changes and there's different seasons in life. And I think it's okay to like reminisce on the good times. But I also sometimes for my life realize that like in if I do that too much, it's almost like I'm missing out on what's happening now that's so good. And I think that you can look back on something and say that was great, but then it's like, how can I make this season of my life great too?
Yeah.
Because it's hard to look back sometimes, especially as you get older. Like I definitely look back and I'm like, wow, like my 20s were so fun, or like, whatever. But yeah, I think that things change as, different seasons in our life, and it's like maybe one isn't as exciting as the other, or maybe one is better than the other. And it's just all a part of that and getting older and changing roles. But yeah, I appreciate your time. And I know I took more time than I asked. So thank you
I
so
don't
much
mind. I
again.
don't mind. Like I said, I talk too much. So
No, it was great. I appreciate it. And hopefully we'll stay in touch. And,
yeah,
thank you so much
I,
for being on today's episode.
maybe in a year you can interview my assistant chief and he can give you a whole different perspective. Uh,
Yeah. Smiley, right?
oh, Smiley. Yep.
I love it. Thank you so much for your time.
Yep. You're welcome. Nice to meet you again.
You as well.